Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We just had some technical difficulties to work through, and so we are here. It's my great pleasure to introduce Kammy T. Jain, MD. She is the founder of Mindful Family Medicine in Boone, North Carolina. So thank you for joining us, and I will turn it over to Dr. Jain. Thanks.
Thanks, Janet. No matter how much you prep, there's always technical difficulties at the end. Can we go to the next slide? So today we're going to be talking a little bit about anxiety and ways that don't involve medication or supplements to treat anxiety. So who am I to talk about this? I've been a family physician since 1996. I went to Wake Forest School of Medicine in Winston-Salem. And my family practice residency was in New Jersey, in a very rural part of New Jersey. Currently, I'm building Mindful Family Medicine in Boone, where I try to give a functional medicine approach to chronic diseases. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. So functional medicine, if you haven't heard of it, it is the approach to the human body as if the human body were a complex integrative network of chemicals and organs. So anything where you affect one organ system, you're going to affect all of them. And the way I like to think about it is as if it is the body is a plant. And what I used to do is treat the leaves. So if the leaf is looking a little dodgy with hypertension, I would treat the hypertension. Or if there's some acne, I would treat the acne. But now I treat the soil of people, or I try my best to, and see what kind of plant or what kind of body they grow from that. And the premise is that if you give a patient a solid foundation of nutrition, emotional health, and physical activity, they are going to be more responsive to healing and to medications. Oh, I'm getting a little notice to speak louder. I'm going to put on a microphone.
Is that doing a little bit better? Okay. So the other thing with functional medicine is that when you don't have a disease, that doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. Our goal is for people to be vibrant and to enjoy their life and to be optimal. And again, treat the soil, not the leaves. Next slide, please. Next slide. Our goals for today, I'm going to review a little bit of the biology of anxiety, not too much, and then explore different ways to diminish anxious feelings without using medication. And the way I decided to structure this was just like I do a patient visit. So each patient I see leaves with a plan, and I'll go through each form of that plan. And hopefully that will help you see kind of how functional medicine would approach this. We'll do a trial of a breathing technique, and if we have time, we'll do a trial of tapping, which is an emotional freedom technique that my patients use, and hopefully I'll have some time to answer some general questions. I cannot give any specific therapy or individual advice in this format. It really is just for information. Next slide, please. So let's define anxiety. All of us have felt some anxiety at some point, and that's normal. It's part of life. But to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, that fear or anxiety has to be out of proportion to the situation the person's in. It has to hinder their ability to function normally. And there are lots of types of anxiety disorders. And I think everybody has kind of one type that they think of. So some people, they think of panic disorder. Some people, they think of social anxiety disorder. And for the purposes of this talk, it doesn't really matter what the category is. We're really going to what each person needs. Next slide, please. So for the biology of anxiety, this talk will talk about the autonomic nervous system. And this is the automatic nervous system that we have. So you can't really mentally control it easily. The parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system are in a balance. So the parasympathetic nervous system is called the rest and digest, whereas the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. It's very helpful when you want to, a nice plane for the flight, but anyway, it's very helpful if you want to take action and you have to get something done. But it can be harmful if we get stuck in that mode of high alertness. Can anybody think of a time where either as a nation or as a person, you would get stuck in high alert mode? If you do, if you could put that in the chat, that would be helpful for me. And we'll give that a couple minutes. Eric, is there a banner for that one?
Sorry, the first one I have is rest the mind.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, if we didn't get anything with that in the chat, one of the things I was thinking of when people being stuck in fight or flight is if you think about the elections, this past election, a presidential election, no matter who you were voting for or hoping for, it was very stressful, and people were watching the news over and over again and analyzing numbers as if it had any difference as far as the outcome goes. And it didn't, but hours were spent looking at the news, watching the news and seeing what happened. And it doesn't really matter. We didn't have any effect on the outcome. So that's a time where really I felt like all of us were just stuck in this anxiety. Next slide, please. So the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, so this is the fight or flight. When you're getting ready to do something, you're ready to run or to rescue a baby, you need quick energy, you need glucose. So not only will your body be making extra glucose, you will crave quick glucose, quick sugars for energy. Also, your cortisol levels are going to increase and your adrenaline is going to increase. So you're going to have increased alertness of the senses. You're going to have increased blood pressure, increased blood coagulability, so that's clotting of the blood, increased heart rate, your muscles tighten in readiness to move, and you've got blood flow going to your muscles and in your limbs, but maybe shunting away from your digestive system. So this is great when you need to just get going and you need to run. You need to push a boulder to save the small town below you on the cliffside, whatever the situation, but you are ready to go. Next slide. But when you're in this drive long term, your blood sugar stays high, your blood pressure stays high. It also interacts with some of your other hormone loops, your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is a mouthful, but that's something that is a big feedback loop that regulates your reproductive hormones, your thyroid, and your other hormone cycles. And digestive issues are also affected. So if you're always in this fight or flight, you're always on, your blood is always being shunted away from your digestive system. So you can imagine what's going to happen. You can have bloating, you can have diarrhea, you can just digest your food poorly where you just don't feel well when you eat. Irritable bowel syndrome can be tied to having constantly high levels of stress. Next slide, please. Now, the parasympathetic system, this is what we're going to use as one of our tools. This relaxation state that our body goes into is for the maintenance and repair of your body. Your cells that are old or damaged, they get cleared out by your body. Your digestive lining repairs itself. Sleep is the ultimate rest and repair time. You're out, your body is cleaning out the garbage of the day, And the tricky thing is that when people are really stressed out and have a lot of anxiety, they will wake up in the morning, so 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., and have trouble sleeping. So not only are they stressed out, but they're not getting that deep sleep continuously where they can clear out their toxins and get ready for a new day. So if you do wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety, that is a great time to practice some of the breathing techniques that we'll be going through. If you can't sleep at night, then what do? You start learning how to tap into your parasympathetic nervous system by getting mental rest during the day. Because of the way we have this set up tech-wise, my assistants are going to have to help me. But can anybody else tell me ways that you could rest your mind during the day? And I'll give you a minute to be able to put that in the chat. Excellent, excellent. So we've got meditation, yoga, a quick nap. Those are all excellent. Taking a walk, excellent. Eric, could you hit the next slide or the continuation of this slide? You guys get an A+. Meditation, listening to calming music is super easy for people who can't meditate. When you're anxious, as you can imagine, sitting down and being alone with your thoughts is the last thing you could find helpful. Your mind is just spinning and spinning. So that's when maybe putting on some music that you can really get into, or doing a craft that's absorbing. So whether it's crocheting, woodworking, painting, something that's repetitive that gets you in a flow where you're out of the present day worries. Yoga and Tai Chi, especially if you're involving balance, are helpful because your mind is so occupied with, okay, if I shift this way, I wobble. If I shift this way, I don't wobble. And it's very distracting in a good way. And it also gets you really in tune with your body, which is extremely helpful when you're dealing with anxiety. Cooking something you know by heart, repetitive household chores, you can do them and pay attention to the senses. If you're folding laundry, and this is no joke, pay attention to how warm it is, pay attention to how it feels, pay attention to how it smells, what it looks like once it's folded. There are not a lot of things in life that we can just accomplish and be finished, but a load of laundry can be one of those, except for the socks. But those are the things that can bring you a sense of calm. Next slide, please. So I like to think about the ocean when I think about life. You can go to the ocean, and if you don't know how to swim and you've never seen the ocean, those waves coming at you can be terrifying. They just come at you and come at you and come at you. And if you've never experienced that before, wow, does that seem overpowering. But if you know how to swim in a pool, that would give you some confidence. If you've swum in the ocean before, that can actually look wonderful. That can look inviting. If you are very comfortable swimming in the ocean, then that looks like something that's delightful. You can love the feel of the water on your body. You can love the way it lifts you in the air, and it can feel great. So my hope for you today is to just give you a couple of starting points so that when life is coming at us, issues are coming at us in waves, we at least know how to swim or wade into that ocean, and eventually we're going to learn how to enjoy even challenging things that come up. Next slide, please.
Dr. Jain?
Yes.
Actually, someone in the chat said one of the ways that she deals with the stress is reading a fluffy romance novel that she's read. She just rereads the fluffy romance novel. So, great tip.
That's a good one, especially if it's not too long. So when I see patients in my practice now, in my personal practice, I always give them a prescription for diet and for supplements. I give them a prescription for movement, for spiritual and emotional work, a prescription for relaxation and rest. And this is the one that they usually skip out on the most. Sometimes detoxification, and then rarely medications. So I will go through this dealing with anxiety. Next slide, please. So your diet is all your inputs. So not just food, but drink, also content. What are you getting online? What are you getting from your fluffy romance novels? What are you getting from your newspaper? What are you listening to on radio? And also input of drugs and medications, even if those are illicit or prescribed. And what I want people to start with is pay attention to how you feel with these. Can we see the next slide, please? So food input. With almost everybody, the more you can have a whole food diet with lots of colorful vegetables, limiting the processed food and limiting sugar, which is kind of a Mediterranean diet, the better. I give more specific recommendations depending on that person's needs and what we're working on with them. Some people have food sensitivities and food allergies, and we have to tailor a different diet for them. So serotonin is a hormone in our body, and you may have heard of it before with the term SSRI, which is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, another mouthful. But those are medications like Prozac, Lexapro, Celexa, and serotonin. What those medications do is they keep more serotonin in the gap between neurons in your brain. So serotonin, when there's more of it, you feel happier, you feel less depressed, you feel less anxious. There is more than half of the serotonin in your body, more than half of it's in your gut. And the interaction of some of the foods you eat with certain families of bacteria will boost your serotonin levels in your gut, and that is associated with improved mood. There's not really a great paper showing that increased serotonin in your gut will correspond to increased serotonin in your brain. But either way, in my patients, I have seen when they eat more vegetables, and sometimes I have to do probiotics to get the bacteria colonies started, that will improve their mood. And I'm going to talk a lot more about this next week in the microbiome talk. The other thing with diet is to try to help people to stabilize their blood sugar. Any changes in blood sugar can cause anxiety, especially if they're rapid changes. In general, having a lower carbohydrate diet will stabilize your blood sugar throughout the day and just help you keep your mood more stable. I want you to think about kids at a birthday party. Next slide, please. So this is one of my children after having cupcakes for her birthday. And, she's wild-eyed running around the restaurant. And I feel bad for kids when they completely lose it after having a cupcake. I just got a question about how do prebiotics and probiotics impact serotonin? So that's a good question. Prebiotics are the fibers in foods that bacteria digest. Probiotics are actually bacteria. So there are probiotics and prebiotics in foods, and you can get them in the health food store. So I will look at a person, and from what they're already eating and their digestive patterns and some of their other symptoms, I can surmise what they might be missing as far as bacteria, if they are any, or surmise what they need to change in their diet. I always start with diet first because it's just the most basic natural thing. So I might have them start eating a lot more colorful vegetables. And if they have trouble with that and trouble digesting it, then I will add a probiotic. So the bacteria from the health food store to help them break down those vegetables. And again, I will go into detail with that if you're able to join me next week for the microbiome talk. Okay, next slide. Beverages. So pay attention again when you drink caffeine. A little bit can be helpful, but too much or too often can increase anxiety. And it's interesting to pay attention to what you feel after you have coffee, tea, or soda. I personally have found that if I'm extra sleepy, caffeine hits me harder. But for some reason, instead of decreasing how much coffee I drink, that's the day I feel like, oh, I'm tired. I better have that second cup. And then I feel jittery. But I'm learning. Water. Most of my patients, I have them have a full glass of water each morning when they wake up. And they usually report some increased alertness. They also report that it can help them make some better choices for breakfast just because they're not starving. Alcohol. Again, pay attention to what you feel. I'm not saying that people shouldn't ever drink alcohol, but when they do, pay attention to your dosing. Sometimes one glass of wine is wonderful to relax you, but 1.5 will make you numb or make you check out. So just be mindful of what you're taking into your body and how it makes you react. Next slide. Supplements. Supplements, some of these need to be thought of as medications. If you've been on antidepressants and anti-anxiety more than 2 years, more than 3 years, a lot of them will deplete your nutrients that you need to make your own endogenous or internally made serotonin or other anti-anxiety hormones. So an integrative or a functional medicine physician can help you figure out, looking at your history and what medications you've been on, what vitamins might help you. Vitamins like tryptophan, 5-HTP is a type of tryptophan, B vitamins, iron, and others. But it can be tricky to figure out on your own. Fish oil and vitamin D, I actually do feel comfortable recommending to just about everybody, but especially anybody who's dealing with anxiety or depression. Fish oil, there are different forms of it, and I'm not going to go into that here. But they use that for traumatic brain injury, especially if people are having mood disorders in the military, and that is the first step in any brain recovery. So 1 gram of fish oil a day is very safe. I like Nordic Naturals. They do not sponsor me, but they do take the mercury out of their product, and so I like that. Vitamin D, I don't know anybody in North America who has enough vitamin D, maybe some fishermen, but most people need vitamin D, and 1,000 international units is a very safe, minimal dose to help you have better energy, and it also just helps all your hormone systems work a little more smoothly. For muscular tension, if anxiety leads to a lot of muscle tightness and sleep disorders, magnesium can be very helpful. I do have some resources that I'll link to at the end of this chat. I talk about picking the right magnesium, but very briefly, magnesium's all the different salts have different side effects, and you want to pick the one that has the side effect you want. So if you tend to be constipated, you want magnesium citrate. If you tend to be the opposite of constipated and have diarrhea when you're anxious, you want mag glycinate. But you don't have to memorize that. I have all that information on my Facebook page and elsewhere. Lastly, for supplements, I use a class of food products called adaptogens. And these are supplements that help you moderate that cortisol response. So if you've been running high stress all the time, over years, you'll just bottom out and you'll be exhausted. So this helps keep that gap narrow to where you function. So you do react to stressors, but in a way where you're prepared and you go out and you get stuff done. So ashwagandha is one I love. It's an Indian herb, and Gaia Herbs makes a version that I find super helpful with patients who can't shut their mind off at night to sleep. They're constantly running that mental list and they just can't sleep. Rhodiola rosea are for people who are sleeping okay, but they're exhausted all day because they're putting so much energy into worrying, they don't ever have enough energy left over to think. reishi mushroom powder, and these are reishi mushrooms on the slide that I found on my hike here in Blowing Rock. But reishi mushroom powder is just kind of generally mellows people out. And that can be found in all different forms. They have a company called Four Sigmatic makes a coffee drink that has reishi mushroom in it. And it's okay. It's not great coffee, but it does have reishis. So that's a lot of information about diet and supplements. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I will answer them as they come up as best as I can. There's a question about ADHD. And ADHD, I think of really like anything else with functional medicine. Why are people getting it? For kids, one of the biggest things I see is a combination of ADHD and eczema. And I do find that an excess of dairy products can contribute to that. So a lot of times with ADHD, I have them do the fish oil, the vitamin D, and then there are things I take out of their diet while I really improve the vegetable content and the fish content of their diet. So hopefully that gives you a starting point. Okay, next slide. Movement. So movement is exercise as well as sometimes things that you don't think of as exercise. So heavy exertion will increase your cortisol level and can increase your energy. So for people who are really depleted and tired, sometimes physical activity will be very helpful. The other side of that I see is when people are very stressed out for a long time, they feel like they have to blow off that extra adrenaline. And short term that'll work, but after a long years of dealing with this or months of dealing with a stressful situation, that heavy exercise, whether it's running or lifting or CrossFit, it increases the cortisol level. And what people will tell me is they can't lose weight, they can't sleep at night, and they're just flying. They're just pumped all the time. And those people I have to convince, like maybe they can still do their CrossFit for a little bit less time, but try to convince them to do something mellow. So yoga is fantastic, and there's lots of different types of yoga. So it would not be power yoga. It would be things that are more restorative and contemplative. Tai Chi, same thing. It's repetitive. It's trying to get your body to feel like it's flowing, to feel like it's connected, to feel like you belong on the earth. Qigong also is very grounding. This past year and a half, I learned about Feldenkrais, which has a lot of overlap with somatic yoga. And this is fascinating to me. What they are repetitive, progressive exercises that build up on each other. And they are supposed to repattern your nervous system into ways that you had them patterned as a baby. So it's to try and get rid of where you're stuck in your mobility and instead let you tap into what you're feeling, kind of like a child does, and to give you some joy. I have found it very effective in people who are just like locked in. If their chin is locked forward or their shoulders are locked up, it's a very non-challenging way to undo those habits, undo those body holding patterns. Any questions about this? Okay, go ahead to the next slide, please. One of the other things you can do using the physicality of anxiety is when an anxious thought comes up, take a minute and think about where you feel it. A lot of people will feel it in their jaw. People carry chronic anxiety in their hips a lot, like their butt muscles are constantly tight. Uh, Classically, especially with the computer, we'll feel tension in our neck and shoulders. When you have an anxious thought, does your face feel flushed? Is your heart racing or pounding? So taking a minute to say, ooh, this crappy thing happened. This car cut me off. What am I feeling? It can take you out of that instant reaction to be angry. Next slide, please. So once you have that event happen, notice the tension and sensation in your body as if you were an outside observer. Try to place your hand on the area that feels tense, if it's safe to do so. Take a deep breath and imagine your breath going into the space under your hands. Do those hands move when you breathe? Can you take a deeper breath and try and get to a place where you almost feel like the breath is going into that area? You can also sweep your hands off any other areas that feel tense. I'll take off my headset, but sweep off your forehead, sweep off your neck, sweep off your arms. Hands can often feel a lot of tension, and just sweep them off after you do a breathing exercise, and that can be helpful. Next slide, please.
Dr. Jain, I just wanted to say we did have one question in chat. Bunny asked, how often should I do yoga in a week to decrease anxiety?
Good question. So a lot of it depends on the severity of your anxiety, but I would think a bare minimum would be twice a week. And that is basically a learning to tap into your parasympathetic. Almost all yoga classes involve breath. And so even if you can't, suddenly do a down dog in the middle of the grocery store, you can do a deep breath with your mask on, of course. Or once you get back into a safe situation in your car or outside of the store, you can do a deep breath and just say, how did I feel when I finished that yoga? Oh yeah, my spine was straighter. Oh yeah, my chin was up and back. And so it would just be a lesson. If people are very anxious and very tight, I have them try 5 times a week. Not everybody has that kind of time. But there are so many resources now. That's one of the great things about the pandemic that's come out of it, is there are so many free yoga resources on YouTube. And the people who run yoga studios have been so generous with providing content that's 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, 25 minutes long, that really you have choices now that I don't think we had 2 years ago. Next slide. Emotional work. And we'll go through some examples of all of these, but this includes cognitive behavioral therapy, which is done with a therapist, journaling, connecting with people in your life, grounding, which is a way of noticing and sensing objects in your environment, and gratitude practice. And as I said, we'll go on this further. Next slide. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So stuff is going to happen. We can have a thought about that stuff, and it will change our feelings. And that's really where all this emotional work centers on, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, is this quote. Next slide. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the gold standard of therapy for anxieties. You reframe your thoughts, and this teaches you to react to new situations with new, more productive thought patterns. So a situation causes a thought. You have to recognize what that thought is, and that thought causes a feeling. And let's say that's a feeling you don't like, being stressed out, being angry, whatever it is, being frightened. So you learn a new way to think about the situation, so that allows you to have a different feeling. So you practice this with cognitive behavioral therapy. You practice it over and over until you ingrain those thoughts, and the more positive, productive thought is a reflex. So here's an example. I know my boss has it out for me. I hate going to work. I'm going to go into work. They're going to pick on what I do. I work so hard on this project, and they're going to tear it apart in front of everybody. Janet, could you put yourself on mute? So here's the reframe that you would learn. What if my manager's mood has nothing to do with me? What would happen if I asked my manager if there was anything I could do to make her or his situation better? So that's just an example, but cognitive behavioral therapy works through that with multiple parts of your life. Next slide, please. Could you change the slide? Writing. So journaling can be extremely helpful, and it's essentially free. You write the worst case scenario that you can think of, and this can help you over time from repeatedly having that thought bounce around the head. And this is a great time to just be a drama queen. Write down everything, every injustice you felt, uh, everybody who is mean to you, and you can do this on a daily basis, and it gets shorter and shorter as you do it. This should be writing by hand. It should be free form. It seems to be much more effective than typing. There's something about the neurologic pathway of having the thought, putting it to your hand, writing it out, and then reading it that's helpful. You can review that journal that day. You can tear it up. You can burn it. You can do whatever you want. But if you really have one where you're just like vomiting your feelings onto the page, keep it and look at it a couple days later when you're feeling calmer. It can be really helpful to look at that and say, wow, boy, did I fly off the handle from just this one little thing happening. And then the next time that happens, you have a little bit more space to not fly off the handle. Next slide, please. Grounding. Grounding can mean a couple of different things, but the quick version is that you are trying to see yourself in your environment. So we have people stop and notice 3 things around you. So you would notice, oh, my coffee has gone cold. Oh, whatever, the dog left this toy on the floor. And then you sense 3 things that you haven't been noticing. Notice what the temperature is in your room right now. Notice if there's any sounds in the background. Notice if there's any breeze where you are. Are there any smells around you? I have a lovely candle burning in the background, so that's nice. A little bit of orange. Notice what the lighting is in your environment. Notice how your clothes feel on your skin. Then you take a deep breath, you feel the air enter and leave your lungs, and you keep noticing what you can notice in the environment while you breathe. So if you try to do this the first time while you're anxious, it's not going to work. You're just there's too much going on. But this is something to do while you're calm. It teaches you how to tap into that parasympathetic system so that when you are stressed out, let's say you turn in a big report and somebody's like, oh, don't worry about it. We don't need it anymore. And you spent all night working on it. That's a great time to say, okay, let me sense what's around me. What temperature it is. It's a little hot around my face. But those type of things to get you out of your reaction and into the physicality of what you're feeling right then. Change slide, please. Breathing can activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and breathing exercises have become very popular. I actually used them at the beginning of the pandemic, making sure my patients were in a safe place to breathe. But I used them to teach my patients not just calming, but also how to use these extra muscles of breathing, because that does seem to be helpful if somebody were to get COVID. But even in addition to that, it's fantastic for just learning to distract yourself, calm yourself, and realize, hey, I'm alive, I'm here, this is now. Any breathing where your exhale lasts longer than your inhale will activate your parasympathetic nervous system. The classic is you inhale for 4, you hold it for a count of 5, and then you exhale for a count of 6 or 7. And then you notice the feeling of your breath and what moves in your body when you breathe. And we'll go through an example of this. Can we go to the next slide? Everybody get comfy. Okay, first we're going to prepare our posture. Try to just take a breath and breathe into your belly. We're going to open the front of our chest. So you can't see my hands, but roll your hands up to the sky and then relax your arms, and that should open up your chest. And take a breath, and I can feel it going a very different place right into my chest. Now with that same posture, take a breath that goes into your chest and your belly. Now this is really fun. Clasp your hands behind your head. If you can lean back a little, and then take a belly breath. All right, so whatever posture was the easiest for you to kind of feel your belly pooch out when you're breathing, a diaphragmatic breath, take that posture. So I'll rotate my arms out. So we're going to count this. We're going to do this breath twice together. So let's just start. Take a breath in and then breathe out. Now we're going to inhale for a count of 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 2. Inhale for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 4. Hold for 2. And then you can work from there. See if you want to extend your exhalation. This is a great thing when I see a patient schedule that is just overwhelming for the day. And I think, oh my gosh, I'm screwed. There goes lunch. I do a breath, and honestly, it just helps me focus, and I can get to work and do what I need to do. Next slide, please. Compassion for others begins with kindness for ourselves. This is a quote from Pema Chodron, and she's a monk. And this is the basis of the next part of some of the emotional part of the treatment I do with patients is really to learn to be nice to yourself. And especially moms, they are tough on themselves. They really are harsh on themselves. And giving patients space to be nice to themselves can really open up their feeling of empowerment. We are going to next, actually not practice a breathing exercise, we're going to practice a tapping exercise. Can we go to the next slide? Tapping is also called the emotional freedom technique. This was founded in the 1990s, and it uses acupuncture concepts. You pat certain areas of your body while stating affirmations out loud, and it feels really unnatural or silly at first, but when you get into a rhythm, it can be very helpful. I think because the attention is going to the physicality of where you're tapping, patients don't have room for the negative self-talk that always comes up, especially in patients with anxiety. So we are going to try this, and I'm going to make sure I have my cues in front of me. But again, get comfy. You're not going to need a lot of room, and I'll walk through it first, and then we'll try it together. Next slide. So first, you're going to tap the side of your hand. It's called the karate chop part of your hand. And you just use 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, whatever's comfortable. Then we're going to tap the middle of the eyebrow, the side of the eye, under the nose, under the chin, or at the chin, the beginning of the collarbone, and then under the arm. It does not matter at all which side you do, dominant or not dominant. You can actually try both and see on your own time and see what works. And I will give you a link on a very good YouTube video on doing tapping. All right, so everybody ready? Figure out what hand you're going to tap with. Maybe tap with your dominant hand if you'd like. So on the side of your hand, and I'm going to say each statement twice, so you can listen the first time and then say it with me the second time and paraphrase it however you would like. So on the side of your hand, even though I feel anxious, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel anxious, I deeply and completely accept myself. Middle eyebrow. Even though I feel stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Outside your eye. Even though I feel that I'm always worried, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel that I'm always worried, I deeply and completely accept myself. Under your eye. This is 2 fingers. Even though I feel like normal things are a struggle for me, I accept myself and my feelings. Even though I feel like normal things are a struggle for me, I accept myself and my feelings. Under the nose. Even though I feel overwhelmed by everything I have to accomplish, I deeply and completely admire how much I do each day. Even though I feel overwhelmed by everything I have to accomplish, I deeply and completely admire how much I do each day. Chin. Even though I feel anxious, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel anxious, I deeply and completely accept myself. Middle collarbone. Even though I feel stressed out, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel stressed out, I deeply and completely accept myself. Under the arm, kind of right at the bra line. Even though I feel that I am always worried, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel that I am always worried, I deeply and completely accept myself. Take a deep breath. So when I do this, I feel a little tingly. I feel kind of awake everywhere. I definitely feel just a little lighter. If anybody feels comfortable, they can share in the comment section. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Detoxification. So I don't put people on colon cleanses or anything very extreme. This is just day to day trying to keep yourself healthy and keep your system supported. So some comments came in. I feel more relaxed. I felt foolish, but I feel better. I really like the under the nose one. So this is interesting. I have found that some places, and this happens with acupuncture too, it almost feels sensitive in those spots. And the thinking is these tapping areas are tapping into your meridians where you have energy stuck, especially negative thought energies. And when you're tapping on it and saying that you're okay and you accept yourself, it allows energy to flow through those areas and unstuck those meridians so you can, or unstick those meridians so that your energy can flow and you can feel supported and whole. So I don't know how much is the meridian, how much is distraction, how much is just taking some time to not think about your bills or your paper that's due or whatever. I feel like I could focus on the here and now. That's good. People definitely notice the difference, and people like the tap under the eye. This can definitely be done for prevention, and it can be done for pain. I do this a lot for people with chronic pain. So it will be more along the line of, this pain I feel doesn't mean that I'm broken. This pain I feel, I accept it, but I can still live a full life. This back pain I feel, and we go on like that. And that is, it's strange to me how effective that is, but it is very effective, especially with chronic back pain, for people to get out of that story that they tell themselves, that they are ill, they are broken goods, and that they are their pain. Okay, detoxification. But those are great comments. Thank you. Clean water, as I mentioned before, I have my patients start with a pint glass of filtered water every morning before they have their coffee, after they pee, of course. And that seems to really help replenish the fluid that you lose breathing overnight. And it can also decrease, like I said, your hunger in the morning. And it seems to be better than just starting right out with coffee or tea, which are both dehydrating. For some of my patients who have chronic anxiety, I consider mold exposure, especially I live in Blowing Rock or Boone, North Carolina, in Watauga County, so way out in the mountains. There is a lot of mold. And sometimes until we deal with people's mold exposure, nothing really breaks them of that anxiety cycle that they're in. Sweating, so through exercise, through saunas, sweating can be helpful to get rid of toxins. Encouraging lymph circulation. So when I talked about sweeping the arms, any kind of exercise that you do, getting a massage can be very relaxing, and it does tend to circulate a fluid called lymph, which is the basis for your immune system. So for patients who have had COVID, I have had them work on their lymph system to get all that garbage out of their body as their immune system is fighting the virus-laden cells. Colorful vegetables, especially the green leafies, the minerals and vitamins in kale, in broccoli, um, in arugula, they do help your liver to detoxify. Plenty of fiber in diet. My aim is for a bowel movement every day for my patients, and that again is a detoxifying experience. Turn your Wi-Fi router on or off overnight if you can. Put it on a timer and see if from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. you can have your router off. The theory is that the electromagnetic frequencies that are coming off of your Wi-Fi router at night can disturb sleep and not make you as rested in the morning, and therefore a little more prone to anxiety. Schedule your news feed and do not check your news at other times unless safety is an issue, like you're looking for a hurricane. But like we talked about with the election, there's nothing to be gained by reading the news every hour on the hour. It's distracting. It's usually depressing as all get out. And limiting social media has the same effect, to schedule it and keep that minimized. There was a study by the New England Journal of Medicine, and I'm sorry I don't have a slide showing it, but it showed that once you get past 2 hours of screen time with news or social media, not work, but social media or news, that anxiety levels just start shooting up exponentially. Screens off 60 minutes before bed, both to get that content away from you, as well as to let your body not have that stimulation to say that it should be awake. I have a question. What is good advice or tips for a socially media dependent person to reduce the anxiety caused by it? Take breaks sometimes, but how often should I do that? So is this that the job is dependent on social media? Yeah, I think the more you can get up, look away from your screen, look out at nature, look at trees, look at the clouds, drink water. Again, pay attention to your senses that are not just visual. Maybe moving where you are away from your screen, getting close in sometimes, getting further away as you're reading things could be helpful also. You want to just shift that sensation that's coming in. Next slide. So very specific to stay-at-home anxiety. When stay-at-home orders started, I had my patients, and honestly myself, I had to work on this, is to have a schedule. You know, I wasn't going to my office to work. I could have scheduled a patient anytime, but I had to say, okay, no. Even though I can do this anytime, I shouldn't do this all the time. So I woke up at the same time. I actually made breakfast every morning, even if we didn't have to go anywhere. And we ate the breakfast at the same time. We had dinner at the same time. And I cannot tell you how much anxiety that relieved, because it gave me a sense of normalcy. Have as much of a demarcation of work time versus non-work time as possible. And as I mentioned before, schedule and limit your news intake. The other thing that can be helpful, if we are, hopefully not, but if we do get stuck at home again, is to put some energy into learning something new. Challenge yourself. And this is especially helpful to do with your quarantine mates. So we did quite a few art classes on YouTube, my children and I, and my husband, whenever he could join in. And it was just great. My mind was completely on, I don't know how to watercolor a tree, or why does my mountain look like this and his actually looks like a mountain. So it's fun, and you just need to get out of the anxious thoughts that are bouncing around. Next slide. This is a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. We do not have to become heroes overnight, just a step at a time, meeting each thing that comes up, seeing it not as dreadful as it appeared, discovering we have the strength to stare it down. And this is so true for my anxious patients, especially if it's social anxiety. I don't want them to go out and host a party. I need them just to make eye contact with somebody in the grocery store. I just need them to go to a party for 5 minutes, try to have one conversation, and then they can leave, and they practice it, and they realize nothing bad is going to happen. And this is heroic. It is really hard for for us to tamp down our anxious feelings in this day and time. And when my patients do, it's just like night and day. It's just, I'm so proud of them. Next slide. These are some references, and Janet might be able to tell us how I can get these to you. There's a book by Rangan Chatterjee. He's a British family practitioner, and it's called The Stress Solution. And it is really simple and it's very attainable. And when you read it, you're like, well, I know that, I can do that. But what he does so magically is he shows you how to incorporate these little changes in your life. And he calls them stress reduction snacks. So they're 5-minute things that you can do to connect with your spouse. One thing he does that's lovely is I think he and his wife have a pot of mint tea every night. No kids, just them, and they actually make eye contact and they have a conversation. The Ultra Mind Solution by Mark Hyman is much more boot camp. It is intense, it's restrictive, recommendations on diet and movement. But if that's what you feel like you need to just shake things up, make a new start, that's an excellent resource, and I stand by the information he puts forth in that book. The video I referred to earlier is by Jessica Ortner. She and her brother, Nick Ortner, they are just masters of tapping, and they have been fantastic in putting out content for everybody. But she has an emotional freedom technique video specifically about anxiety. I believe it's about 17 minutes long, but that link is there on YouTube. And then on my website, I try my hardest to keep some fresh content up there as situations change. And that's www.mindfulfamilymedicine.org. I do have links on that page to my Facebook page and to the world's smallest YouTube channel. I think I only have 3 videos, but I'm working on it. I'm trying. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm welcome any questions you might have, and I'll do what I can to answer them.
I know the library does have a lot of Mark Hyman's books. I know we have a few of his titles. I would have to check on the first one that you had mentioned. I know also we have the emotional tapping. We have some books on that also.
Excellent.
So go to the library's website, www.cmlibrary.org, and search for the catalog. And you'll be able to search by keywords, you'll be able to locate some material. There is a question about vegan lifestyles, Dr. Jain.
Yeah, I don't have a presentation about vegan lifestyles, but certainly if I have patients who present who are vegan, I work with them. Sometimes nutritionally it can be a challenge because fish oil is something that I do like to prescribe for brain health. Flaxseed oil is available if that's specifically what you were wondering about, and that is also an omega-3, but it's tougher to get to high enough doses. Yeah, but I do feel that whatever diet you choose, as long as it's not kind of the microwave, lean cuisine, hot pocket diet, I can work with you as long as there's some fresh vegetable content in there.
I had a question, Dr. Jain, just briefly. Is the tapping, is the release from that also, I would say, kind of like what massages do? Is there some, when you're tapping, is that releasing some of that, I don't know, bad stuff, I guess?
Well, so the theory is that it's trapped energy, or chi, that it's stuck there. There are lymph nodes there, but I don't think you tap enough to do anything with your lymph node. So I think it is probably more Eastern philosophy ways of working or mechanisms than anything we can explain well through Western philosophy. Like, circulation to your face doesn't really have any brain effects in Western philosophy. Oh, fish oil. How much fish oil each day? 1 gram per day, and you want to find a source that has been screened for mercury, or the mercury has been eliminated. But 1 gram is the minimum. If people have had severe depression or traumatic brain injury, they go up to 4 grams a day. And I don't know, I've tried to take more than 1 gram a day, and you end up having some fishy tasting burps. So it's all a balance of pros and cons. We do eat quite a bit of oily fish in my household. So sardines are very affordable, and I think I bought 10 cans of them at some point during the pandemic, and we worked our way through those. Sometimes a harder sell for the kids. Luckily, mine like them. Let's see, I have a question. Does too much melatonin over the counter taken for sleep issues affect anxiety? It does not seem to, but I have found that it doesn't really help great long term. Short term, meaning a week or 2 weeks, melatonin I think is fantastic. Melatonin is one of the supplements that people have been looking at with COVID when you have an infection, that seems to be helpful. That has not really panned out, but it has not panned out to be harmful either. So my patients, their melatonin doses that I give them are extremely low. So 0.3 milligrams is my typical dose. So sometimes it has to be a chewable tablet that I have them bite in half. So I have found that keeping the doses low, and then when really the what hits the fan and you're just stressed out, then you could go up to 1 milligram. But I don't think it causes anxiety. I think the only way it could cause anxiety is if it stopped helping with your sleep, you're sleep deprived, and then that just makes us edgy and more prone to be anxious and reactive. Yeah, and you can help us figure this out, Janet, but I believe this talk is going to be available at least short term on YouTube.
Yes, it will actually be stored on both YouTube and Facebook. The library's YouTube, Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, just Google that YouTube channel. And it will probably stay up at least for, I don't know, at least a month or so. Our marketing department will determine when that comes down. But yes, it will be available on YouTube. Also, it's also available on our Facebook, on the library's Facebook page. You don't need a Facebook account to view it. You'll get some prompts, but then you'll be able, you don't have to have an account on Facebook to view it. So, so we have a question from the audience also.
Oh, there's two. One is kava tea and holy basil tea at night are nice to help promote sleep. So thank you for that. And then there's a question about, is the library doing more programs like this? As I mentioned, next week I'm doing a microbiome talk, and I've definitely geared it towards talking about the immune system and how to support your immune system. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully some of you can join us for that.
Doctor, I have a quick question. You kind of see a lot, and you had mentioned them in your speech yourself about detoxifying and toxins. Can you speak at all to what sort of toxins you're referring to? Like what?
Yeah. So, I especially if anybody does have anxiety, it's a touchy subject to bring up. But so the things I personally try to get out of my body are any exposures to plastics, to pesticides, to just chemicals in general that I've exposed myself to through my life. For people who have severe anxiety disorder or Alzheimer's, a lot of times we're talking about detoxifying from heavy metals that were in somebody's water supply. So all my patients have their water filters, and because we are in the mountains and most of us have well water, we do want to be careful to filter out any heavy metals that might be in our water system. So we do kind of get bombarded, and the way I think about it is I'm not even going to worry about that too much. But what I'm really going to worry about is just optimizing what my body can do, because some things I don't have control about, whether it's air pollution or ground pollution or water pollution, except by voting. That's my little political plug.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, everybody, for the participation. It was great.
Join us next week. Next week, April 28th, next Wednesday night, for Dr. Jain's microbiome talk. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Good night.